because we talked about the word collaboration there, and Nicola and Eric, and coming from those augmented providers, the information that you're working with. But if you don't have the same sort of collaboration from shipping companies or manufacturers that are going to
Yep.
provide you with that information, it's not going to work either. So it's making sure that you understand not only your own financial footprint from a sanctions perspective, but actually what information you have downstream as well from your suppliers or your providers as well.
Yeah, that's right, Michelle. So I think Eric mentioned the point. Sorry, I think it's transparency. Transparency across the chain is absolutely key. The easier by which you can get this information, the accuracy of the information, of course, as well. But first and foremost, having the information available to you.
Yeah, so I think that's for me it's a really interesting point because if I look at Moody's especially, and Eric mentioned it at the beginning, it's not just knowing your direct suppliers, but it's also knowing those indirect suppliers and where they're coming from and the sanctions that are happening there as well. I actually have a buyer that we're working with at the moment who's actually going, I want to actually invite all of my direct suppliers because it's the only way that I have a true view of all of my risk and compliance. I think Telsa has actually just started doing a project like that going forward.
Going back to the comment on sanctions and relating it to the power of the US dollar, I mean, Eric, given you and I are both in the States, I was kind of interested on Moody's take, given we've got the elections coming up. Obviously could sway some sanction power one way or another. So I'm just wondering, how are you guys viewing 2024? How's that impact going to be coming? Because I think David's right, the dollar carries a lot of sanctions power with it, but I think there's some frustration around that in the market. So I'm interested in your take with this election year.
Yeah, somebody from the Moody's economics team probably has a much more detailed view on this than myself, Chad, but not to get political here, but obviously it's a very volatile time, and I think corporations are probably doing some analysis and planning. From who I have been speaking to, yes, it is a concern in terms of depending which party is going to be in office come next February, then there's potentially some contingency planning on how we could or how they could have to react or reshape their portfolios in terms of who are they engaging with, and to create potential contingency plans, whether it's a supplier in a different region of the world, or a different partner, etc. So I think that's always at the top of the mind of a chief compliance officer in terms of that potential regulatory change that might happen, and trying to, you see a lot of, I guess an example is with Apple recently, and they say the friendshoring of the supply chain, right? Moving a lot of the components to India, for example. So I think you might start to see some, movements like that, depending on how the election shakes out. So I think at a high level, just to summarize, it's really preparing potential contingencies for the third parties that you're working with in the event it goes either way.
Yeah, and I think the preparation for any change that you're going to have, as we've talked about, is the data. Clean data, having accurate data is going to be able to empower the compliance officers to make quick decisions as we see changes come out. So I think it's even more important to start to work on that preparation, as we've talked about, on at least the data cleanup, getting an understanding of your supply chain, the risks around it. What suppliers do you have, and how is that going to be impactful? Because I think you're right, there's going to be some changes in what comes next year, and being able to react quickly is going to be dependent on the data that you have available.